David never thought much about who lived next door. His apartment building was the kind of place where people came and went every few months. Students, short-term workers, even a few off-worlders from the new exchange programs. It was a revolving door of strangers. The walls were thin, the water pressure terrible, and the rent was cheap. That was all that really mattered to him. So when the building manager mentioned that someone had moved into the empty unit beside his, David just nodded politely. Another tenant, he thought. No big deal. He didn't even ask if it was a human or not. These days, it could be either. But the first time he saw her, everything changed. It was late evening, and David was returning from work, balancing a bag of groceries. As he climbed the narrow staircase, he saw a figure struggling with a large container at the top landing. At first glance, he thought it was just another resident moving in, but then the hallway light caught her skin, and his heart skipped a beat. She wasn't human. Her skin shimmered faintly, like light passing over liquid metal. Not bright, not flashy, just a soft iridescence, as though her body carried its own secret glow. She was tall, almost a head taller than David, with long limbs that moved with a strange, careful grace. Her face was different from any human's, yet not frightening. Smooth features, wide silver-black eyes that seemed to reflect the whole hallway, and a mouth that curved into something that might have been a smile, or maybe a warning. David froze halfway up the stairs. He had seen aliens before, of course. Humanity's first contact had been almost a decade ago, and Earth had slowly adjusted to the idea that it wasn't alone in the galaxy. But most of his encounters had been at a distance, on the news in crowded markets, maybe walking past one on the street. Never this close, never next door. The woman, or at least David thought of her as a woman, was holding a box that looked far too heavy for her slender frame. Her arms trembled slightly as she adjusted her grip. Without thinking, David blurted out, "Need a hand?" The alien tilted her head, her long hair sliding over one shoulder like strands of shadow. For a heartbeat, she just looked at him, her silver eyes unblinking. Then slowly, her mouth curved again, and this time David realized it was a smile. A real one. "I would like that. Thank you," she said. Her voice surprised him most, of all. It wasn't mechanical or strange, not like the translator devices he'd heard in movies. It was soft, careful, melodic, like someone who had practiced every word with patience. David climbed the last steps, set down his groceries, and took the box from her arms. It was heavier than it looked, full of books or equipment, he guessed. She watched him with a strange intensity as he carried it into the apartment for her. The room was mostly bare, just a few scattered crates and a rolled-up sleeping mat. Clearly, she had only just arrived. "Thanks," she said quietly when he set the box down. "No problem," David replied, wiping his hands on his jeans. Then, after a moment of hesitation, he asked, "You just moved in?" "Yes," she answered. Her voice had that same measured rhythm, like every word was being weighed carefully before leaving her mouth. "I am Selkara." David nodded, his throat oddly dry. "I'm David. Nice to meet you, Selkara." Her silver eyes blinked slowly, as if she were committing his name to memory. Then she gave another small smile, and David realized something else. There was no hostility in her expression, no suspicion, just curiosity. The hallway light flickered, buzzing faintly, and for a moment they stood there in silence. David felt strangely self-conscious, aware of the distance between them, yet also aware of something else, the loneliness in her gaze. It hit him then. She was new not only to this building but to this world, a stranger among humans. And though she carried herself with grace, there was a shadow in her eyes that spoke of isolation. David picked up his groceries again, awkward but sincere. "Well, welcome to the neighborhood. If you need anything, I'm right next door." Selkara tilted her head again, as though she was studying the meaning behind his words. Finally, she replied softly, "I will remember." And as David, walked into his own apartment. He couldn't shake the feeling that something had just shifted in his life. He had a new neighbor, yes. But this wasn't like any move-in he'd seen before. There was something in the air. Something electric. Something unknown. For the first time in years, David's ordinary, quiet life suddenly felt different. And deep down, he wondered if it would ever be the same again. The first week with Selkara living next door felt like stepping into a new chapter of David's life. At first, it was only small encounters, passing each other by the mailbox, meeting in the hallway while taking out trash, a brief nod in the laundry room. She was quiet but always curious. Her silver eyes seemed to study everything, every gesture, every word, as if she were constantly trying to solve a puzzle. One evening, David found her sitting on the front steps of the building, holding a small flower pot in her lap. The plant was wilting, its leaves yellowing. "Bought that at the corner shop?" David asked, lowering his grocery bag. Selkara looked up, blinking those liquid metal eyes. "Yes, I wished for something living, but it suffers. I do not understand why." David sat beside her. "It probably needs sunlight and water. You can't just leave it inside the box." She tilted her head. "Inside box? The pot," he explained, chuckling softly. "It's not a box, it's a pot. And flowers need care. You have to keep them near the window." Selkara's lips curved in that uncertain smile again. "Humans bring living things inside homes? Away from open sky?" David realized then. Something simple to him, like keeping houseplants, must look strange to her. He nodded. "Yeah, we like them inside. Makes a place feel warmer, more alive." Selkara fell silent, gazing at the plant as though trying to understand not the flower but the human behind the action. Then she whispered, "Interesting." From that moment, David noticed how many questions she asked. Not about science or politics like he'd expect from an alien exchange student, but about ordinary things. Why do humans greet with a smile? Why do you close your eyes to rest instead of humming like my people? Why do you eat food in groups, not alone? At first, David laughed. He didn't have deep answers. "We just do," he'd say. But then he realized her questions made him think about things he never noticed before, things that were so normal he had stopped seeing them. Sometimes he found her copying little habits of his. He'd wave to a neighbor, and the next day Selkara tried the same, her wave stiff but sincere. He'd make coffee in the morning, and later he'd hear her fiddling with the same machine, watching the dark liquid drip as though it was magic. But then one night, something happened that made David pause. He returned home late, exhausted, his backpack heavy with work files. As he reached his apartment door, he noticed something strange. The door frame glowed faintly in the dark hallway. At first he thought it was a prank, maybe kids with glow paint. But as he leaned closer, he saw the glow wasn't random. It was a pattern. Smooth, swirling lines curved like rivers of light. They pulsed faintly, as though alive. The smell hit him next, not unpleasant, sweet, sharp, like the air after a thunderstorm. He traced the glowing trail with his eyes and realized it wasn't just his door. Selkara's doorframe had the same marks, brighter, more complete. As David stood frozen, Selkara's door opened. She stepped into the hallway, her silver black eyes shining even more brightly in the dim light. Her nostrils flared slightly as if tasting the air. "You saw?" she said softly. David pointed at his door. "What is this? Did someone break in? Is it dangerous?" Selkara's gaze lowered. For a moment, she looked almost ashamed. "It is not danger. It is claim." "Claim?" Her voice dropped into a whisper, heavy with meaning. "My people. When the season comes, we mark those we wish to bond with. The glow is mine. I marked you." David's chest tightened. "Marked me? For what? Marriage?" Selkara's eyes met his, unwavering. "Closer, stronger. It is forever." The hallway went silent. The hum of the lights seemed far away. David's throat went dry. Forever? She had marked him? He barely knew her. His instincts screamed to run, to laugh it off, to pretend it wasn't serious. But when he looked at her, he saw something deeper. Fear. Vulnerability. As though she had just revealed the most dangerous part of herself. She stood tall, but her hands trembled slightly. "I should not have done it," she admitted, her voice breaking. "But you are kind. You do not look at me like specimen or like danger. You look like I am person. That is why I chose." David couldn't move. His mind spun, torn between fear and an odd ache in his chest. She hadn't done it out of instinct alone. She had done it because she was lonely. And that thought, more than the glowing mark, more than the word forever, was what stayed with him all night. That night, David barely slept. He lay in his bed, staring at the faint glow seeping in from under his front door. The patterns Selkara had drawn, or whatever they were, still pulsed faintly outside like veins of light. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw them again. Swirling shapes, mysterious and alive, and her words echoed endlessly in his mind. It is forever. Forever. The word pressed on his chest like a weight. When morning came, he stepped into the hallway cautiously. The marks were still there, glowing softly even in daylight. Neighbors passed by without noticing, as if the light wasn't visible to human eyes. That unsettled him even more. He touched the frame gently, and the glow rippled beneath his fingers, warm like skin. Selkara's door opened quietly. She stood there, her hair loose around her shoulders, her skin dimmer in the morning sun, but still carrying that shifting shimmer. She looked at him with a mixture of expectation and dread. "You touched it," she said softly. David swallowed. "I had to. It's strange. It feels alive." Selkara lowered her eyes. "It is part of me. A mark that carries my scent, my energy, my intent. My people release it only during season. To bond. To choose." David rubbed his temples. "And you chose me. Selkara, we've known each other, what, 2 weeks?" Her gaze rose again, silver black and steady. 2 weeks, 2 years, 2 breaths. Time is not measure of bond. Connection is. He almost laughed, though not because it was funny. "Connection? I'm just human. You don't even know me." "I know enough," she whispered. The hallway went silent. David could hear the faint hum of the building's old lights, the drip of a leaky pipe. Selkara stood still, waiting. He didn't know whether to run or step closer. Finally, he sighed. "Look, I'm not saying you're wrong. I don't understand. What happens if I accept this mark?" Her claws flexed slightly against the doorframe. "Then our lives twine. My body, my soul will see you as chosen. We share strength. We share pain. We protect one another until ending." "And if I don't?" David asked, voice low. For the first time she flinched. "Then the mark fades, but slowly I will weaken. It is shame for my kind. Worse than death." David's heart clenched. She wasn't threatening him. She wasn't demanding. She was confessing something that clearly cost her everything to admit. He turned away, unable to meet her gaze. "Selkara, you're asking me to tie myself to you forever. That's not easy for humans. We're not built that way. We make mistakes. We change our minds. Forever scares us." Her footsteps came closer, light but deliberate. When she spoke, her voice trembled like she was holding back tears. "Forever scares us too. That is why it matters." David froze. He wanted to argue, but the truth in her words cut deeper than he expected. He thought of his own life, days blending into nights, work, bills, empty evenings with nothing but the glow of his laptop. No one waiting for him, no one to hold. Maybe forever was terrifying, but so was living with nothing. He turned back to her slowly. She stood just inches away, her silver eyes glistening. She wasn't a monster. She wasn't dangerous. She was just alone. More alone than he had ever been. "I don't know if I can be what you want," he admitted, his voice shaking. "I don't know if I can survive your season, or whatever this bond means. But I don't want to hurt you either." For a moment, silence hung between them like a fragile thread. Then Selkara did something unexpected. She reached out, her clawed hand trembling, and gently touched his wrist. Not cutting, not holding, just resting there. "You already are what I want," she whispered. David's breath caught. Her touch was warm, softer than he expected. He didn't pull away. He didn't know why, but some part of him didn't want to. Finally, she let go, retreating a step, her composure returning like a mask. "I will not force. You must choose. But remember, my mark does not fade quickly. You will see it. You will feel it. Until you decide." David stood there long after she closed her door. His wrist still tingled where she had touched him, and the glowing mark on his apartment seemed brighter than ever. He didn't know what terrified him more, the thought of accepting her bond, or the thought of refusing it. David avoided Selkara for 2 days. Not because he hated her, but because he didn't know what to feel. Every time he walked past his glowing doorframe, his chest tightened. The mark seemed alive, pulsing faintly as though reminding him, "She chose you. She marked you." He tried to distract himself with work, cooking, even late-night TV, but nothing worked. The memory of her trembling voice and the way her hand had rested on his wrist haunted him. He had seen her strength, tall, otherworldly, powerful. Yet beneath all that there had been such fragility, such loneliness. On the third evening, he found himself standing outside her door. His hand hovered over the wood for a long time before he finally knocked. The door opened slowly. Selkara stood there, her silver-black eyes dim, her hair tied back loosely. The glow from inside her room spilled into the hallway, the same faint light as the markings. She looked tired, as if holding her body upright was costing her energy. "David," she said softly, his name rolling off her tongue like a prayer. He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "Can we talk?" She stepped aside, letting him in. Her apartment was bare, almost painfully so. Just a mat in the corner, a few crates stacked neatly, and strange metallic tools he couldn't identify. The air inside was heavy, warmer than the hall, carrying that same electric sweet scent of her mark. It made his skin prickle, but not in a bad way, more like standing too close to a storm. Selkara sat cross-legged on the floor, and after a pause, David joined her. For a moment, silence filled the room. Finally, he spoke. "I don't understand this. I don't understand you. Why me? Why mark me?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze stayed fixed on the floor, her hands folded tightly in her lap. When she finally looked up, her eyes shone with something raw. "Fear. Because you looked at me," she whispered. David frowned. "What do you mean? Lots of people look at you." "No." She shook her head firmly. "They look through me. Like glass. Like danger. Like curiosity to study, not person to know. But you," her voice wavered. "You looked, and you saw me. Not alien, not threat, just me." Her words struck deep. David swallowed hard, guilt and warmth twisting together in his chest. "Selkara, I'm just human. I'm no one special. I get tired. I mess up. I don't know if I can promise forever." She leaned closer, her claws resting lightly against the mat. "Do you think my people do not fear? Forever terrifies us too. But that is why it has meaning. Because it is risk." David's throat tightened. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that humans weren't ready for this, that he wasn't ready. But as he looked into her silver eyes, he saw the truth she carried. She wasn't binding him out of instinct alone. She was reaching out because she was desperately, painfully alone in a world not her own. "I'm scared," he admitted quietly. Selkara tilted her head. "So am I." The words hung in the warm air between them. Two beings from different worlds, both afraid, both vulnerable. And in that fear, there was something powerful: honesty. Her hand trembled as she reached forward, her claws curling back, to keep from cutting him. She placed her palm gently against his chest, right over his heartbeat. "Here," she whispered. "Your heart. It speaks more truth than words. It is steady, strong. That is why I marked you." David's breath caught. He wanted to pull away, but his body didn't move. The warmth of her touch spread through him, mingling with the pounding of his heart. He realized then that her kind might not just hear with ears. They might feel through touch, through rhythm. His pulse betrayed him. He was scared, yes, but beneath that fear was something else. A longing he had buried for years. The longing to be seen, to be chosen, to matter. Selkara closed her eyes, listening to his heartbeat as if it was the most precious sound in the galaxy. "You think you are ordinary," she murmured. "But to me, you are everything." David felt his throat close. He had no answer, only silence. After a long moment, Selkara withdrew her hand, her eyes glistening. "I will not force you," she said softly. "But know this. My mark is not chain. It is gift. It says I trust you more than anyone I have known." David stood slowly, his legs unsteady. He wanted to run, to breathe, to escape the heavy emotions pressing on him. But before he left, he turned back to her. "I don't know if I can give you forever," he said honestly, "but I don't want to walk away either." Selkara's lips curved into the faintest trembling smile. "Then stay. That is all I ask." And for the first time since she had marked his door, David felt something shift inside him. Not fear, not confusion, but the fragile beginning of trust. The days that followed were heavy with silence. David told himself he needed space to think, that it was the smart thing to do. He went to work, came home late, tried to drown himself in routine. But the truth was simple. He was scared. Every time he passed the glowing mark on his door, he felt the weight of Selkara's choice pressing down on him. Forever. The word echoed in his head like thunder. He avoided her, not cruelly, but carefully. If he heard her steps in the hallway, he lingered in his apartment until she was gone. If she sat on the building steps, he walked the long way around. He told himself it wasn't rejection. It was just time. Time to decide. But every night, as he lay awake in his bed, he heard something faint through the thin walls. A low sound, soft and almost musical. It wasn't words, at least not in any language he understood. It was a hum, a song without lyrics. And it wasn't happy. It was slow, aching, the sound of someone who carried loneliness like a second skin. David closed, his eyes guilt gnawing at him. She wasn't just waiting. She was hurting. On the fourth night, he couldn't stand it anymore. He sat on the edge of his bed, running a hand through his hair. The thought of accepting her bond terrified him. But the thought of leaving her alone, her glow fading into shame, tore at something deep inside him. Finally, he stood and walked into the hallway. Her door was closed, but the faint light seeping around its edges told him she was awake. He hesitated, his hand hovering just above the wood. For a moment, fear screamed in his chest. If you knock, you're stepping into something you can't undo. But then the humming drifted through the door again, trembling, fragile, and his hand moved before his brain could stop it. He knocked. The sound stopped instantly. Silence pressed down. Then slowly, the door opened. Selkara stood there, her long hair loose, her eyes brighter in the dim light. She didn't speak right away. She just looked at him, as though trying to read what he carried in his heart. David swallowed hard. I don't know if I can be what you want. I don't know if I'm strong enough or enough at all. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't interrupt. He took a shaky breath and forced the words out. But I also don't want to keep running. I don't want you to think you chose wrong, or that you're alone. Her gaze softened, the silver in her eyes shimmering like wet glass. She stepped aside, wordlessly inviting him in. The air inside was thick again, warm, electric, carrying that strange scent that made his skin buzz. It wasn't unpleasant, but it reminded him that this was real, that her season was not just custom, but something biological, powerful. They sat on the floor across from each other. For a long time, neither spoke. David could hear her breathing, steady but deep, as though she was holding herself in control. Finally, Selkara broke the silence. Her voice was low, but steady. When my kind mark, we risk everything. If bond fails, we weaken, we wither. Some do not survive. That is truth. David's chest tightened. He had thought her earlier words were dramatic, maybe symbolic. But the way she spoke now told him otherwise. This wasn't just emotion. It was life or death. You knew this, he whispered. And you still marked me? Yes. Her answer was immediate, unwavering. Because I saw strength in you, not in body, not in power, in heart. You carry loneliness, but you still smile at neighbors. You still offer help to stranger. You still... See, that is strength. Her words cut through, him like a blade and a bomb at once. He had never thought of himself as strong. Most days he felt small, ordinary, forgettable. And yet, to her, those tiny pieces of kindness were enough to risk her life on. His voice broke when he finally spoke. Selkara, I'm so afraid. Afraid I'll fail you. Afraid I'll trap us both. Selkara leaned forward, her eyes glistening. Fear means you care. Only those who care are afraid of failure. The simplicity of her truth left him speechless. He lowered his gaze, unable to hold her eyes any longer. For a while they sat in silence. Then slowly David felt her hand reach out. She didn't touch him, not this time. She just let her clawed fingers rest inches from his own, waiting. And, though his heart pounded with fear, David lifted his hand and let it brush against hers. Not a promise, not forever, not yet, but a beginning. The next morning, David woke with a strange feeling in his chest. It wasn't fear, not exactly. More like heaviness mixed with warmth, the way the air feels just before a storm breaks. He remembered the moment, last night, his hand brushing against Selkara's, and it lingered in him like a spark that refused to go out. All day at work, he couldn't concentrate. His mind kept returning to her words. Fear means you care. He thought about the glow on his door, about her lonely hums through the wall, about the way she touched his chest, as though his heartbeat meant more than words ever could. By the time he came home, the choice was still not clear, but the silence was worse than the fear. He didn't want to keep avoiding her. Selkara opened her door even before he knocked, almost as if she had been waiting. Her eyes searched him instantly, her silver gaze steady but nervous. You came. David nodded. Yeah, I came. She stepped aside, and he entered. The air inside was thick again, warm and charged, but this time he didn't flinch from it. He sat across from her on the floor, their familiar place. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was alive, humming with unspoken words. Finally, David broke it. I keep telling myself I can't do this, that I'm not strong enough, that forever is too much. He paused, his voice rough. But every time I say that, I think about you. About how you risked everything just to not feel alone. And I realize I'm more afraid of leaving you behind than I am of forever. Selkara's lips parted and her eyes shimmered. You mean... I mean, David continued, taking a deep breath, that I want to try. I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I can promise I won't run away." For a long moment, Selkara just stared at him, her body still as stone. Then slowly her shoulders trembled, and she exhaled a shaky breath that sounded almost like relief. "You do not know," she whispered, "how much those words mean." She reached out, her hand trembling, claws curled back to keep from hurting him. This time she didn't stop short. Her palm pressed against his chest again, right over his heartbeat. The warmth spread instantly, deeper than before, almost like her touch was sinking into him. "In my people," she said softly, "when bond is chosen, we do not share only space, we share strength. If you fall, I rise with you. If I weaken, you steady me. Pain is lighter, joy is brighter. We are more." David's heart pounded beneath her hand, but he didn't pull away. "And if I fail?" he asked. Selkara shook, her head gently. "Failure is not in breaking. Failure is only in never trying." Her words struck deep. He thought of all the years he had lived half alive, working, eating, sleeping without anyone beside him. No risks, no bonds, no forever. Maybe that was the true failure, never daring to connect. He let out a shaky laugh. "You always know how to cut straight through me, don't you?" Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Only because you let me see you." David's hand moved on its own, reaching up to cover hers where it rested on his chest. Her skin was warm, smooth yet strong, and beneath his palm he felt a faint pulse, not human but steady, alive. For the first time he realized her people must carry their life force close to the surface, always ready to share. As his hand closed over hers, the glow in the room brightened. The markings along the walls pulsed stronger, spreading from her, darker to his, weaving patterns like living veins of light. Selkara's breath hitched. "It begins," she whispered. "What begins?" David asked, his voice low. "The binding," she said. "Not finished, but started. Our lives listen to each other now." David's chest tightened. He didn't know what that truly meant, what it would change, what it would demand of him. But when he looked into her shining eyes, he felt something he hadn't in years. Not fear, not confusion. Hope. They stayed like that for a long time, hand over hand, heart to heart, while the glow pulsed softly around them like a living promise. And for the first time, David didn't feel like the mark was a chain. It felt like a light in the dark. The days after the beginning of the bond felt different. David couldn't explain it in words. It wasn't as if his body had changed or that he suddenly had alien powers. But there was something inside him, a quiet awareness, a thread of warmth that seemed to hum beneath his skin. Sometimes, when he sat alone in his apartment, he felt a faint pulse that wasn't his heartbeat. It was hers, Selkara. She explained it one evening, her voice soft as they sat side by side. "Our bond is not finished yet. It will grow. It will learn us as we learn each other. It is not magic. It is trust, given shape." David nodded, though he still struggled to understand. But what he did know was this: he wasn't alone anymore. The silence that used to weigh on him at night was gone. Even when he couldn't hear her voice, he felt her presence. The neighbors noticed too. Some whispered when they saw the glowing lines etched across both their doors, pulsing gently in the dark. Some looked curious, others uneasy. A few avoided him altogether, muttering under their breath. But David didn't care. For once in his life, the opinions of strangers felt small. Selkara laughed more now. Her sad humming had faded, replaced by soft songs that filled the hallway. Sometimes David caught her smiling at the simplest things, his clumsy attempts at cooking for her, the way he explained human sayings, or even when he tripped over his own shoes. Her laughter was light, airy, like wind chimes, and every time he heard it, something inside him loosened. But there were difficult days, too. The bond was not easy. Sometimes David woke with headaches that weren't his own, only to find Selkara sitting quietly, hiding her exhaustion, Other times he felt sudden waves of emotion, fear, longing, ache, that he realized came from her, not him. It was strange, carrying someone else's feelings inside, but it also made him more careful, more aware. He couldn't ignore her, not when her heart brushed against his own. One night, after a long day at work, he found her waiting on his couch. She looked tired, her glow dimmer than usual, but her eyes were soft. "Are you sure?" she asked. David blinked. "Sure about what?" "About me. About bond. It grows stronger every day. Soon, it cannot be undone." He sat beside her, the weight of her words sinking in. She was giving him one last chance to walk away, to end it before it became unbreakable. He thought of his old life, the empty apartment, the quiet dinners, the endless cycle of days that felt the same. Then he thought of Selkara, her trembling hands, her silver eyes, her voice when she said he was the first to truly see her. David reached out, taking her hand gently. "I'm sure,"